Good morning. In a 1968 sermon, Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King told the congregation, "You may be 38 years old as I happen to be, and one day some great opportunity stands before you and calls you to stand up for some great principle, some great issue, some great cause. And you refuse to do it because you are afraid. You're afraid that you will lose your job, or you're afraid that you will be criticized, or that you will lose your popularity, or you're afraid that someone will stab you, or shoot at you, or even bomb your house. So you refuse to take the stand. Well, you may go on and live until you are 90, but you are just as dead at 38 as you would be at 90. And the cessation of breathing in your life is but the belated announcement of an earlier death in the spirit." Let us pray. Let's pray. Creator God, open our ears, our hearts, our mind, and direct our path. May the words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart be acceptable unto you, O God. Amen. Never did I think that I'd actually be asked to give a message in a church. I also didn't think that at 27, I'd be asked to use my life and my story in that message. There are, however, many experiences and stories that have molded me and led to the person standing before you today. Some of these are fun and exciting, others not so much. However, I want to pull out a few of those experiences that connect to the series of nonviolent resistance. I was a church girl until I was 13. Grew up in the Brethren Church, christened, baptized at 7. I truly loved God, and I wanted to be a pastor. However, reality began to set in at 13. I realized that as a girl, it was not going to be possible to be a pastor in the Brethren Church. At least at that time. Times are changing and the church is dying. But more importantly, I liked girls. And because of that, my desire to be a pastor was completely out of the question, at least with the brethren. I didn't believe necessarily that I was sinful, but I knew that my church thought so. And so at 13, I decided to tell my mom that I might have been gay. Fortunately, I wasn't kicked out, but we did spend some time in prayer. The Brethren Church I went to believes that the Lord's Supper is not a private matter, but a corporate expression. 1 Corinthians 10:17 says, "Because we, being many, are one loaf, one body, for we partake of that one loaf." I decided to stop participating in the breaking of bread at church because I understood that passage to say that since my beliefs and that of my church about my sexuality were so different, I could not in good conscience take communion or participate in any worship activity. At the age of 16, when my parents fully, completely, totally understood and learned that I was gay, I spent a few months in what we refer to as ex-gay therapy. When I was 19, my friend and I were kidnapped, held at gunpoint, and raped. We were targeted because of our sexual orientation. We had two choices: suffer silently or report the matter to the police. My friend chose the former, and I can understand that. I chose the latter. When I went to the police, to officers who are trained to handle instances of sexual violence, I was told to leave this lifestyle and go back to church. The implication was that this was my fault. This life or death experience and the secondary trauma with the police took me back to the comfort of my faith that I had left at 13. For the first time in years, I felt sure of God's presence and relied heavily on that. In the spirit, the alcohol's variables became my anthem, and in the spirit of my church tradition, God was the solid rock upon which I stood. Yet by the time I was 23, I had entered a period of searching and began to identify as an agnostic atheist. But it was during that time that much of my work involved the faith community, including my first visit here to Founders MCC during Pride Weekend of 2014. Slowly, God worked on me to the place I am now. While I cannot recall the exact moment I became aware of the quote from MLK, I remember that this helped me to make my decision to be an out LGBT activist in Jamaica. I may have been 22 or 23 and was considering the necessity and the possibility of starting an LGBT NGO in Jamaica. Whether or not I needed to be out, and if I was out, how out did I need to be? My co-founder and I agreed that one of our first steps, and something that was very important, was that we needed to be out in order to be effective as activists and as an organization. Sometimes our fear is not for our own selves, but for the people we love. For me, though this was a scary moment and a scary decision, my concern was much less for my own safety, but more for that of my family. Because of where my concern was, I decided to have a talk with my dad before I started my organization. Sitting in a food court in Kingston, Jamaica, I told my dad that I had decided that I was going to be publicly out and gay. And his first response was, "Why do you need to do that?" I told him that I was going to be out because I needed him to know that I cared about my safety, but also about their safety. I cared about him, my mom, and my sisters. But I also needed him to know that this was something I believed I needed to do. This moment was, for me, the moment MLK described in his 1968 message. I was 23. If I chose to remain in the closet because I feared for my life and my safety, then I would have experienced my own spiritual death, even if I lived to a ripe old age. For a long time, I never saw the impact nor influence of faith in my work, yet it was the chance words of encouragement from a very unlikely source, from Imam Daid Abdullah, during my agnostic journey, that led me to see how my early Christian faith was still very present in my work. This, of course, was then followed by my reintroduction to MCC and Christianity right here at Founders. I presented on a panel, Realizing the Right to Relate, with two other international guests, and I met Patrice, a 23-year-old who was passionate about her faith and her desire to be a pastor. Still, I never fully considered how faith, or even my faith, had anything to do with my work. But over the course of 2 years, and when I reflect on my earlier work in human rights and LGBT rights, I have come to realize that it does take faith to be an activist. But why faith? Because you are never sure that the campaigning and work and sweat and tears and long nights and no sleep, you are not sure that any of that will actually lead to the change that you want to see. But you believe that it will. And it is that belief that pushes me to continue my work. And on the days when it seems impossible and insurmountable, or the times when significant and potentially negative political changes happen in a nearby influential country, I will call no names, it is this faith that allows me to pause, collect my thoughts, and continue on. When many people think of Jamaica, they think of the beautiful sunshine, reggae music, and the blue Caribbean Sea. But the Jamaica many LGBT people experience is filled with insecurity, violent attacks, sexual violence and corrective rape, discrimination in access to healthcare, employment and housing, anxiety, depression, and a range of other issues. The specific challenge we face is the existence of an 1864 colonial law. Let me repeat that for you. The specific challenge we have in 2017 is the existence of an 1864 colonial law, which criminalizes anal sex and same-sex intimacy between men. The greater challenge is that this law is widely interpreted and used as a general criminalization of homosexuality, which leads to individual citizens taking the law into their hands. Through the continued existence of the law, Jamaica condemns its LGBT citizens to be treated as criminals and second-class citizens. Hence the reason my organization is called Quality of Citizenship Jamaica. LGBT people are verbally harassed and threatened, oftentimes called Batman and Sodomite, which are the derogatory terms for gay man and lesbian respectively. Threatened with physical violence, threatened with rape, attacked by mobs. Because of this antiquated and privacy-invading law, Jamaica is culpable and responsible for the murders of Brian Williamson, a prominent LGBT activist in 2004, for the machete attack against a lesbian by her neighbor in 2015, for the murder of Dwayne Jones, a transgender youth who was stabbed, shot, and driven over by a car simply for attending a street party as a woman in 2013. For the many transgender women and gay youth who live in our storm drains, for the countless unreported sexual assaults and rapes of lesbian and bisexual women, and for the sparse access to justice experienced by many LGBT Jamaicans. Across the world, I've had various friends and colleagues arrested, hit with eggs, prohibited from marching, prohibited from speaking, heckled, among other things, simply for seeking something like the right to life and the right to be treated as equal citizens. Yes, it is 2017, but there is much, much work to be done across the world, and even here in your own home or your backyard, as you would say in Jamaica. Though we are often attacked, threatened, and hindered in our activities and our movements, many of us as LGBT activists have resisted responding to violence with violence. That is not to say that we have not been tempted. In Jamaica, our nonviolent resistance comes in the form of silent protests, raising up new leaders and activists, speaking on behalf of those who cannot speak for themselves, court challenges, LGBT pride events, and other forms. So after giving you all this, laying all this burden on you, you might be thinking, then where does MCC fit into this? Where does Founders fit into this, for that matter? You might be thinking, but Founders is going through a transition, we can't do anything else. We're stretched thin, we don't have the people or the resources. Usually, in secular spaces, when I give a talk, I will mention political activities that can be done and the need for donations. But since we're in a spiritual place, I'm going to try and give a more spiritual response. I'll start off by saying, and this might be a little harsh, as an LGBT person in Jamaica, I did not have much of a relationship with MCC, the denomination. Yes, Reverend Nancy Wilson and a few other ministers came to our country and marched with us in 2010. Yes, we had a budding church there for a while. Yes, I was and continue to be inspired by Reverend Troy Perry. But the average LGBT Jamaican seeking a spiritual home is not thinking about MCC because they do not know about you. You are a church. What are the ministries already in place that can be supported? Who are the people already doing something who could use your support? When I am home, I regularly watch the 11 a.m. service because I have no MCC to go to. This is why I volunteer in the multimedia ministry. Can you lend your talents there? What other ministries have international impact that you can support? Where are your missions teams, such as the one that went to Mexico earlier this year? Do you see the need for new ministry? If you do, tell someone. How can social media be used to reach those who do not know about MCC? The denomination website says that MCC is on a bold mission to transform hearts, lives, and history. That as a people of faith, we have a responsibility to act on behalf of those who cannot effect change on their own and to lead from the margins. To be clear, I am not calling or asking for you to put on your capes and to save us. I am calling for you to be a support where you are needed. Writing from the Birmingham jail, MLK said, "Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. We are caught in an inescapable network of mutuality, tied in a single garment of destiny. Whatever affects one directly affects all indirectly. There are over 76 countries in this world where homosexuality is legal. Jamaica is just one of many. There is work to be done. There are people still in the margins of the United States, of Jamaica, the world over, who can be liberated from those margins. MCC, you are a global church. Founders, MCC, you are the founding church. Your influence is great, and as such, your responsibility is great. Don't take my word for it. Luke 12:48 says, when someone has been given much, much will be required in return. And when someone has been entrusted with much, even more will be required. In closing, I encourage you to meditate on the words of the song Patrice ministered to us. You call me out upon the waters, the great unknown where feet may fail. Spirit, lead me where my trust is without borders. Take me deeper than my feet could ever wander. Let these words be our prayer this week.